Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we made our way through most of the Upper Cathedral Ward. We made our way definitely through the current base of power that is associated with the organization The Choir. However, towards the end of the last episode, we acquired a key to the orphanage, and that allowed us to open a door that seems to indicate there's a little bit more in the Upper Cathedral Ward that we have yet to explore. Before we get to that, though, I do want to take a few minutes here at the start of the episode and address some of the comments that I got on the previous one, at least as of the time of recording. And first of all, this is an idea that I liked and I sort of want to keep in mind going forward. So YouTube user PissRandom, which, boy, I'm not so worried that I got the pronunciation wrong on that one, but it really makes me feel like I'm reading out someone's name from the internet, and yeah, that's what I'm doing. Anyway, YouTube commenter PissRandom is talking about how it's interesting that the Choir, which is a group formed from children who don't have any parents, right? They were raised in the orphanage, seem to have a great desire to make contact with the Great Ones. And we know the Great Ones are sort of a group of parents that have all lost their children. They yearn for some sort of replacement for the child or children that they have lost as a sort of universal experience. So I thought that was an interesting point, and I think there's a particular resonance there with the Choir as this group that sort of are looking for parentage. And I also think you can sort of maybe look at that in terms of the organization of the Healing Church, right? Because they were obviously raised with the church as their parents, but in a way you can sort of maybe see a little bit of family rebellion in the idea that they sort of reject the ideas of Mensis, seems to be the implication, and embrace the even older ideas of Byrgenwerth, which itself, right, that was sort of in the inspiration, right, these ideas that linger through generations, right, that was sort of the intellectual heritage of the church as a whole, but now the youngest portion of it, right, the people who were raised in the orphanage have come back around and are looking to get back to this past, right, of Byrgenwerth, possibly against the wishes of the School of Mensis, who have their own desires and are causing all sorts of problems for us on this particular night of the hunt. So, interesting little setup there, but I'm not sure, like, how much we can separate the, like, thematic, like, the ideological heritage and the role of the Healing Church too much from this idea of, like, groups of parents and children sort of looking for the opposite figure in the Great Ones in the Choir. But I do think there are a lot of resonances with the story, and I don't want to, like, necessarily spoil things. I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but I think that's going to be interesting to keep in mind as we go forward, right? Of this sort of almost tragic disconnect between a group of children looking for parental figures, presumably, possibly, and we don't even have to speculate on this other group, right? The Great Ones we know are sort of these higher level beings that wish for children. So I do think that that is a particularly fruitful thing to keep in mind. Anyway, we also got some more information on the last episode, some of which was a little bit mechanical and some of which was a little bit more visual. So for one thing, I failed to point out that, where is the badge? It's going to be a key item, right? Failed to point out Cosmic Eye Watcher badge. If we look at this image, I'll bring up the biggest one here, right? So you keep this, I talked about how it looks like an eye, but if I come out here and you look at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll note it's a very similar image of an eye that you can see on the insight symbol, right? That was pointed out by Martin Szigeti, and I thought that was kind of funny because this just sort of goes to show how I am not very great when it comes to putting together visual information. I've never drawn that connection. I mean, I noticed that the insight symbol looks like an eye, and I noticed that the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge looks like an eye, but I never thought, oh yeah, the Cosmic Eye Watcher badge and the insight symbol, they look pretty similar. Another piece of visual information, I don't necessarily know what the, like, point of this is, right, what the intention of the comment was, but Martin Szigeti also pointed out that there is something to consider when we look at the student uniform. I don't know which one, but I'm guessing the one with the robe. in comparison to the choir set. And so I'm looking at it from the front here, and I'm not necessarily seeing anything. Oh, I guess there is a similar sort of robe over something else, right? You have this sort of opening. Are those flaps there, like the shoulder flaps? Is that a bit of visual continuity as well? Not really. Not really, but the overcoat style is similar. What if we look at the back? Okay, we have sort of like this, almost like a hood, it looks like. And then we have the drapes coming off the shoulders. And then if we go back to the choir set, choir garb. Oh yeah, we also have that hood in the back there. Interesting. So you can see a patterning after the student set, at least if I'm interpreting this correctly, which sort of echoes visually the indebtedness of the choir to Bergenworth, maybe. That's interesting. And I'm curious now, because we know that the executioner garb is sort of like the midpoint, right? We have the idea of the executioners with their draping of the holy shawl. Yeah, you can sort of see how they're the midpoint, right? Because they've got a large hood as well. And they've got almost like a full cape instead of shoulder things. And they've got the big draping of the holy shawl as well. Also, I'm sort of curious now. And this could just be a difference between male and female attire sets. I don't actually know. So I could be way off on this. This is the first time this has occurred to me. But it has occurred to me, so I want to throw it out there now. I wonder if we have the black church set that I'm in now that's pretty low ranking in the Healing Church. And we've also got the white church set, which is similar. Both of these have split holy shawls, right? I mean, they're different colors, right? On the white church set, it's a black holy shawl. On the black church set, it's a white holy shawl. But in both cases, they're split. The executioner set does not have a split holy shawl. Neither does the choir set. And the Mensa sect, sort of associated with the student uniform? I'm not entirely sure what to do with that. I'm not entirely sure if this holds out, but I'm curious, just to finish the thought, I'm a little bit curious as to whether or not maybe, right, we have the idea of the choir splitting the Healing Church. If after the rise of the choir as an institution, we started to get this idea of twin pillars of the Healing Church, which is why the Holy Shawl has sort of been split into two here. Again, that could be nothing. I'm not sure it necessarily works with the whole, like, set of associations with the student set or not. But interesting to think about. Anyway, if I missed the point, Martin Zaghetti, you could maybe raise it in the comments again. But I thought I'd take a look at that on camera, and now I have done that. Okay, what else do I have here? Okay, so both Martin Zaghetti and Rhetorical are making an interesting point that I think could tie together. They made these points independently, but I think they could potentially tie together about the spark that caused the choir to turn their attention to the skies. But I don't think it quite makes sense to talk about that just yet. There's enough left in the area that it's maybe a little bit early, but I'll talk a little bit about, because there are certain things that have fallen from the sky, right? And we know that the choir is watching the sky. And so we have to start thinking about, like, what is this idea of the sudden revelation? And, right, so there's a certain extent to which I can talk about things that we have seen and acquired and start building towards this idea. So I'm not necessarily going to finish this thought right now, but I am going to sort of go back and look at it one more time. Sort of lay the foundation, I suppose, right? Let's go back to the Augur of Ebrietas. And the relevance of this is not fully clear, but let's just remind ourselves, this is in the second to last line of the description here, right? That encounter, that chance encounter, became the beginning of the investigation in search of the cosmos in the underground ruins. Right? And then that encounter, that chance encounter. My theory is that the encounter, which is with the arcane, right? The first line, once in the past, Bergenworth had audience with, that's my interpretation, had audience with a remnant of the arcane. And I think that remnant of the arcane is a reference back to Ebrietas. This is the augur of Ebrietas, right? The forerunner, the thing that comes before Ebrietas, right? And so I think that if we understand the encounter as being with Ebrietas and it happening to a group of Bergenworth scholars, them thinking, okay, we're going to begin our investigation into the nature of the cosmos down in the underground ruins, right? It seems like attention is focused downward as a result of that. And also, right, while we're laying foundations, the very final line of this description, right? So after it talks about how this encounter kicks off the investigation into the search for the cosmos in the underground ruins, we note that this is connected to the subsequent choir. So already in this description, we have the idea that the choir would have something to do with the search for the cosmos in the underground ruins. We also know that the choir has done some chalice dungeoneering, right? At least they seem associated with it. We know the Healing Church has tomb prospectors. They're going down and looking for treasures among the chalices, among the tomb of the gods, and the Healing Church has its own purposes for being down there. And we've got those high-level ritual materials that we discover in the basis of power for the choir. So it seems like they were focused on going downward. And now, as we know, they're focused on going upward. They had some special revelation. And I have some thoughts about that, but commenters were bringing up some ways in which there might be other connections to that, other things that could draw their attention to the sky. And that could potentially tie in with a description I haven't read yet. I've been sort of slow about this because I'm never really going to be able to use this weapon, the Blade of Mercy. But let's take a look at this because it could be interesting, could have some interesting implications here. Okay, so quick translation. First of all, the name, very straightforward, right? Ha is blade, and then Jihi is mercy, so this is very literally the Blade of Mercy, and because it sounds cool, you don't really have to do much to touch it up, right? So the translation is just Blade of Mercy, and as for the description here, okay, a special trick weapon passed down for generations among hunters of hunters, right? Because we know the hunters of hunters, there's one of them, and then the title is passed on for every generation, right? We learned that back when we were talking about Eileen and her quest, and the badge, the crow feather badge, and all that. So this weapon, presumably, is also one of the things that gets handed down. And as we see from the second line, it is one of the oldest weapons in the workshop, right? And then, crucially, right, it's for the workshop. It's not associated with the Healing Church. One of the other ways in which we know that it's old, because it's associated specifically with the workshop. Okay, so that's the first couple of lines there, and then we have the break, and then we get to sort of the second section. For that warped blade, which splits in two by means of a device, rare meteoric iron, which originates from the heavens, the celestial objects, the stars, was used. Right? And again, Hoshi is pretty vague, right? So I'll just say, stars is probably the one that sounds best, right? This idea of this rare metallic meteoric iron that came from the stars. That's the key thing there, though, is that, and if I were able to use this weapon, I could demonstrate this. Maybe I can demonstrate it without even being able to use it. Okay, central column, I'm looking for stats here. You can see that it has a base physical damage of 60 and then a base arcane damage of 30. So there's a little bit of arcane damage that this weapon does all the time. And you sort of have to draw this connection for yourself, but I think the implication being made here is that by traveling through the stars, it's sort of been infused with this cosmic arcane energy, right? Because of the fact that it was made from this meteoric iron. And that's why it is the way that it is. That's what's one of the things that makes this Blade of Mercy special. So we have basically this record of weapons made from a material that falls from the sky and is infused with cosmic energy, cosmic power, arcane, mysterious forces, right? And this isn't the only one. It's one of the oldest weapons in the workshop, but there's another one. It's also made of this meteoric iron. And I think the official translation uses the term siderite? I don't know how it's pronounced. I've never heard it spoken, that particular word, but it's like a fancy term for meteoric iron, if I remember correctly. And so, that comes through the official translation as well. So there's this other weapon. It's the burial blade, another weapon that I'm never effectively going to get in this playthrough. So, oh well, I can't show that one off at all. But there are these weapons that have fallen from the sky, right? And so maybe this idea of things falling from the sky, including these weapons, these legends may have reached the choir, may have been something else. Maybe these are the things that sort of sparked their attention, drew their eyes upward. Maybe not. Maybe there's more to this story, but these are pieces that could go into it. I'm not entirely sure. We're going to come back to this idea. Again, this is one of the things that I sort of want to raise, and then as we get a little bit more information, a little bit more evidence, we can go into the details more strongly. Anyway, just to finish the description here, demonstrates its true worth with attacks launched off of high speed from things such as steps. Right, so the idea is you do the quick stepping attack, and that is where this weapon has its true worth, right? It's not necessarily you walk up and just hit things with it, and that's where this weapon shines. No, this weapon shines particularly in use after, like, quick stepping moves. And it's a little bit of mechanical advice in the form of this description, which is kind of helpful. And you could sort of see that when I was doing the fight against Eileen, right? And the idea particularly, right, this is going to be suited to a hunter of hunters, because hunters are very mobile. And so you dodge around, and then make use of the quick step attack of this particular weapon, which is exceedingly good. Or at least in theory, right? According to the description, it's exceedingly good. I don't actually know what it's like in PvP. But in theory, it's exceedingly good at catching hunters. And therefore, they're sort of pushing you in this direction. And also demonstrating it in the form of Eileen's combat style. So that's interesting. Anyway, that's the Blade of Mercy. That's that set of ideas. I'm pretty sure that's all of the sort of lore-based stuff that I got. I also got a couple mechanical notes and suggestions and things. One of which was, this is interesting. So there are a few things about the sorts of enemies that I'm going to start to encounter, which are sort of truisms, right? One of the truisms that's known about these enemies is they're sort of kin, they're associated with the cosmos and the stars, and therefore they are weak to bolt. They are weak to bolt. However, I've gotten some information that they are also pretty weak to fire. And if I understand correctly, this is older information. I think it might have been Rune Esper who was telling me about this. Also tends to be weak to thrust. So I've gone ahead. I have made a little bit of progress. Actually, now I'm reminded I should show you this mechanical side of my character. I've gotten my arcane up to 45 now. I managed to progress. I defeated the first boss in the Cursed Tumerian Defilement, finally. I did a bit more farming, and I still haven't gotten any fire-based radiant gems. Radial, not radiant. Radial gems. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe, like, the enemies that common sense for, like, ages and ages now, even, like, way back from when this game was first released, like, the enemies that are supposed to drop them, they sort of look like mummies, they wield these flaming weapons, they're in the Chalice dungeons. I know that they drop radial fire gems now. I'm sort of curious if maybe that actually wasn't in 1.00. Like, there was a day one patch for Bloodborne, so maybe it was included in one of those very early, if not day one patches, that those enemies would start to drop those gems. Because I've been farming for a while now, in a number of different dungeons, including now, where I have a rune on that's boosting my discovery, and I'm in a dungeon, right? The idea behind cursed dungeons is you're supposed to be more likely to get item drops out of them, and I've been going for a couple hours now, and I still haven't gotten any radial fire gems. I'm starting to get a little curious about that. I don't think you could ever prove this necessarily, not without data mining in some way that I don't understand, but I think it's suspicious that I've been farming as much as I have and still not been successful. It could be nothing, I could just be horrendously unlucky, but I don't know. Anyway, I have updated my character a bit because of the progress that I've made in the process of doing that farming, and I figured I'd update you on that. But I also wanted to show you, I switched when I was fighting the boss to a bolt-based gem, and I can sort of show you. This is the only one that's really effective for my weapon. Also, note that now that I have a higher arcane, this increased power from scaling, it doesn't just give me 1 more damage than my current fire gem, it gives me 2 more damage. I still think the healing is probably worth it for that trade-off. 2 points, not hugely significant. But I do have a very powerful, comparatively, I think, right? Plus 126 as opposed to plus 104 for this fire gem, right? That seems like a decent increase in damage. But I'm going to hold off. I'm thinking maybe not this episode, maybe next episode is the one where it's going to be most relevant to do the comparison, because the boss that I'm going to fight in this episode, actually I'm about to go there right now, not necessarily the one that's strong enough to run a meaningful comparison on. But we're going to find out, right? I'm going to go with my fire-based weapon. I'm going to try and do some thrusting attacks, and we're going to see how those fare. And then there's other places I want to go back to that we'll see when we get to the boss, right? There's going to be a little bit of a loop back towards information we've already received. And I don't want to be coy about this. I'm just going to go there. We'll take things from there. Okay, back in the Upper Cathedral Ward. Heading up here. And this is the doors that we opened at the end of the last episode. Not the choir, they are associated with the choir. They are not associated with the orphanage. This is just the way to, get the shortcut to the lantern. This way over here is the passage that is associated with the orphanage key. And as we come over here, look at this. Very familiar enemy. So, look at that. 421 damage. So that was a thrust attack done with fire. Pretty decent, I would say. We can sort of compare that to our more straight fire non-thrusting attacks, because I have actually just walked into a boss arena. Interesting transition, right? The boss name suddenly appears, and then you get all these enemies here. You wouldn't really necessarily notice or think about it too much. Except that just happened. Oh yeah, look at that. 200 something? I mean, once you get that transform attack, it jumps up to 702. Which means that second strike is doing 500 damage. So it's probably not worth it to focus too much on the thrust. I think probably the main thing that you would want to focus on with that attack is that transformation attack. Not entirely sure, because obviously the one with the health bar is different than the others. And this is a fun detail that people have noticed over the years. The one with the health bar does not attack. Sort of hides among the others. It's that one right there that I'm currently locked onto. And it just sort of hangs back. Alright. Let's compare. Oh, it jumped away. 293. 205. So still more when you do the thrust attack, but not a huge amount more. Anyway, I don't want to do too much damage to this boss actually right now, because I want to talk about its name. Right, so obviously the enemies we're fighting here, these are the aliens, right? These are the sorts of things that we discovered when we broke into the back of the clinic, right? And we were dealing with Impostor Iosefka. And here, in the course of this boss fight, we get a name for them at last. An official name from the game, right? And the official translation of this is Celestial Emissary, and I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Shisha is the final word here. It means messenger or emissary, right? Those are synonyms, essentially. And I think there is potentially a tie to, the Japanese myth of the tale of the bamboo cutter, Princess Kaguya, right? There are these ideas of she's from the moon, and so these emissaries come down from the sky, and I'm pretty sure Shisha is the idea that gets used there. Also, of course, Shisha is the term for messenger, as in the messengers that we see that are, throughout all the gravestones that, are everywhere in the world of Bloodborne. So, this particular messenger being a celestial emissary, right? I'm not necessarily sure if that's supposed to be a strong tie or not. I suspect not, because I can't see what the connection would be. but there is a potential one there, right, within the linguistics of Japanese. It's not impossible, so I'll bring it up. I'm more interested in the fact that, right, the first term here is seikai. And so, again, the first one is hoshi, which I've talked about before if you read it on its own. Sei in combination, in this particular combination. And it sort of means celestial object, right? It can be used to mean world. It can be used to mean star. It can be used to mean planet, right? It's kind of vague. But star is a pretty safe version of it, right? So if I were to go with a relatively literal thing for seikai, I would say star world, right? World of the stars. And then kara, which is from. And that's sort of the most intriguing thing to me about this, is that when we look at the Japanese, this boss here is identified as a messenger or the messengers, right? Again, because there's ambiguity in terms of singular versus plural in Japanese. So this is a fun way, again, in Japanese of indicating that it's not necessarily just the one boss that I'm fighting here. It's this group of enemies that could all be potentially indicated by this boss name, whereas in English, it just doesn't work that way. In English, you get a different experience where you get kind of a cool hint that only one of them matters, because it's called the Celestial Emissary. Okay, and now, of course, in both versions of the game, you'll know very obviously which one is the one to focus on if you want to do damage to its health bar. But to get back to the idea that I think is intriguing, this one in particular, and probably all of these here in the garden, maybe not necessarily, but probably all these here in the garden, are ones that they're associated with coming from the world of the stars, from the celestial realm. Whereas Impostor Iosefka was dealing with definitively things that were not from the stars, right? Sort of regular people. We knew the people that we sent to her clinic in order, to presumably receive treatment back when we were being tricked. And then as we sort of later discovered, 280. Oh, wow. That ended fast. Okay. Cool. And then we get the communion rune. That's interesting. I wonder if that's supposed to imply there was some communion with the stars going on there, right? Very interesting sort of implications. But now I can sort of more effectively finish the thought, right? Because Impostor Iosefka, we now know, was working on people we were sending her, human beings from this world, definitively, from Yharnam. And she was turning them into identical creatures to this, and these we're getting from the boss name in Japanese are emissaries or messengers from the stars. Implies they came down to Earth. So she was really accomplishing something, it seems, quite special. And this gets back to the idea, right? We know from that one note in Bergenworth in the official translation, right? The man between man and beast is blurred. And I've been saying this whole time, well, maybe there's more stuff that's getting blurred, and maybe we could be thinking about blurred boundaries in terms of ascension as well as descension, right? If beasthood is going downwards, then what about blurring boundaries and moving upwards? What does it look like? And remember what I was saying, these enemies are classified as kin. And we know that the kin of the cosmos are sort of similar to great ones. So these are, like, maybe not all the way there. Maybe Impostor Iosefka doesn't have the ability to create great ones out of people. But she does have the ability to create kin out of people. And this gets back to that whole idea, right? Like, she is looking to move past our own stupidity, right? That whole idea of her quest line. Very interesting. And, appropriately enough, we haven't been back to see her since the Red Moon has been out. So now, with that sort of idea back in our minds, I want to go check in on Impostor Iosefka back in the clinic. Okay. Hello again, everyone. I have just run back through the back entrance to the clinic because the front door was closed. Did I? Okay. My portable lantern has probably long been turned off, so I'm going to turn it back on. Once again, we have the transformed people of Yharnam through here that we sent to Impostor Iosefka. Right? Definitively not of the stars. Well, I guess they are possibly of the stars now. And this is just opening the way. In case you're as lost as I normally am by this setup, this is the lantern that we could get to right at the start of the game. And now we've sort of permanently opened these doors, not to give too much away here. But I wanted to come back a very long time ago on this playthrough when I said I was going to commit to the Impostor Iosefka storyline. One of the things that I got in the form of a comment was someone saying that people tend not to go this route because they don't like doing like evil playthroughs in video games and putting them on the internet. And on the one hand, I feel like, yeah, I get it. This is sort of the two routes that you can go, this does feel like the evil one, right? She's tricking you, and then even after you discover her secret, if you agree to help her carry on her research, you then trick other people into believing you're sending them somewhere safe and they get experimented on without their understanding or will or consent, right? That's pretty bad. But I do think the interesting thing about this particular storyline in Bloodborne is that pretty undeniably, Impostor Iosefka gets results. And I think it's kind of compounded by that observation I was making in the boss fight, the idea that she's used her clinical trials, whatever medicine she's developed, whatever expertise she's gained, she's applied that in such a way after, presumably, and if you go through the DLC, you'll see like the horrors involved in coming to the point that she's reached, right? Presumably after a lot of trial and error and a lot of frustration, she's arrived at this way of creating kin out of regular human beings. And she's doing it before the revelation of the Red Moon. I don't necessarily know if that makes it more or less impressive, right? Seemingly more, right? Because so much of the true nature of reality is hidden before the revelation of the Red Moon. But she's still turning people into kin, into these celestial emissaries. And this is one of the things that we can get to, right? I was talking about how you can sort of get a little bit more from the Japanese in terms of knowing which direction the boss comes from. But it doesn't make any sense if you take that same name, Seikai Kara no Shisha, and like the, envoy of the stars, and you apply that to people you know aren't envoys from the stars, right? So Celestial Emissary works better if you're going to apply that name to the like enemies around the world of Yharnam. So there's a little bit of a bonus for the English. But that's sort of a side sort of linguistic translation related point that I just think is interesting. Her quest to surpass humanity's stupidity, she's been pretty successful. And this sort of gets back to the idea of when Miyazaki gave that interview, he mentioned how he always sort of saw her as one of the heroines of the game. And the other people on the staff sort of found that weird, but she's found some way. She's sort of like the culmination of all the Healing Church has been working towards. The whole goal, right, is for them to ascend, to move beyond the limitations of humanity. It seems to be, right? That seems to be one of the things that even back in Bergenworth, right, these people are going for. And you have that idea just thrown into the Metamorphosis rune that, like, Metamorphosis made their dreams of transformation a reality or something to that effect, right? She's realizing those dreams. She's doing it. Like, this is the culmination of all that time, effort, research, and she's being successful. And you're helping her in her quest, sort of at the end of a very long line of suffering, right? And there's suffering involved. There's suffering all along the way. But she's sort of clawed her way by human means and by human understanding to achieve these results. And there is something very impressive about that. And that's not all. That's not all that's interesting about Impostor Iosefka. As we'll see, she's not telling us, she's not yelling at us anymore, right? What's changed about Impostor Iosefka with the rising of the Red Moon? Oh, that's interesting. She's on top of this patient table here, operating table. Sorry, I can't get a good angle here visually. And she seems to be, like, twitching. And her fingers have this, like, almost spastic sort of motion, moving in these spasms. And I've heard that this position that she's in was recommended as a form of giving birth. I'm not very well versed in that. So that could be the case. Interesting. It's going to be worth keeping in mind. Let's talk to her, though, and see what she has to say.
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast. Oh, God, it feels awful. But it proves that I'm chosen. Don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
So clearly, she believes she's chosen because of this experience she's having. What's going on? What experience is she having? It's pretty vague. Now, I'd mentioned before that if you kill her before the red moon, I don't actually remember mentioning this, so I might not have, but I should have mentioned it before if I didn't. If you kill her before the red moon, you get the Erden Writhe rune. And Erden Writhe, people have speculated, is sort of this idea, like a representation, a rune that sort of represents Erden interacting with women in particular who may potentially give birth. And this could tie in with the storyline that we get with Ariana if you accept that Erden impregnates Ariana. Now, I've sort of accepted that for a long time, but I did get a very interesting comment on one of my recent episodes. I believe this was also from Rhetorical, and that comment was pointing out that we have all this information about babies being used as lures for the Great Ones, so it's possible that Ariana wasn't impregnated by Erden, but that Erden instead sort of influenced the pregnancy because of the lure of the baby. I think that's possible. I personally am still of the opinion that the sort of cosmic birth is the result of a liaison with the Great One. And I think there's a lot that lines up that way for me just intuitively. But, I can no longer just go out and say blanket statement, right? That's necessarily what happens. But be that as it may, right? It's possible that we can understand Impostor Iosefka as being another case of pregnancy here by the Great Ones. Especially if you consider, right, a long time ago now, I think way back when I was going through the Forbidden Woods or something, even before then, I was talking about how, what is it? The elixir, Numbing Mist. Here it is. Numbing Mist is associated with Cainhurst. Right? Its formulation is something that one of the nobles of Cainhurst Castle, or one of the noble lines of Cainhurst Castle, passes down. And it blocks the sort of euphoric feeling that's associated with regaining health. She's got access to a lot of Numbing Mist. Now, it could just be that she's a doctor, and so she has access to things for numbing. But it could be that that's meant to indicate her association with Cainhurst. And what do we know about Ariana if we accept that Ariana is impregnated by Erden? Seems like one of the things that makes it possible for Ariana to conceive of the child of a Great One is that she is very strongly tied to the Cainhurst bloodline herself. She's wearing the noble dress, and we know that when we get her blood vial, right, her blood is associated with something that a member of the Old Healing Church would know was once forbidden. So we're seeing this tie to the Canehurst bloodline, and potentially that being related to the birth of Ariana's child thing with Erden. Maybe, right? If that's your interpretation. That could be what's going on here. Could also be something else, though, because this is all interpretive, right? This is the beauty and the pain of analyzing Souls games and Bloodborne in particular. It could be something. She might have given herself some next level treatment, or the same treatment that she believes is now going to work because she's special. Right? Maybe under the madness of the Red Moon, that's what she's done, and this is just an early form of the treatment that she's given herself. Or maybe if you take an idea from the DLC of the writhing inside the head as being tied to the formation of internal eyes, maybe she's in the process of ascension herself right now. And again, it's just too early and we can't figure it out. There's one more piece to this puzzle. It's not going to solve anything, but it is going to be here, and it's worth getting. We have to do it. We have to kill her in order to do it. Because unlike before, when we would have gotten that Erden Writhe rune, we get a different item now. We get a third umbilical cord. And each one of these third umbilical cords has its own unique text. So we can go ahead and read this one, the 1.00 version, provided I can... Oh, I'm not going to find it under runes. Okay. It's a consumable, right? Yeah, of course, because this one is actually even consumable. All right, and of course, the quick descriptions are the same. Which one is which? Interesting. Because this is 1.00, the Japanese text is a little bit different, right? So you note that these two thirds of umbilical cords, right, or third umbilical cords, sorry, I threw in the US English translation for some reason there, you'll see that the first two sections are identical, right? And it mentions... like these could be used as wards against like evil spirits in the sort of central section here. That information is now kind of outdated. I think that line has been completely removed from the Japanese in 1.09. So there are remnants of sort of alterations that we've seen, right? I believe that this one here, this one mentions the pale moon. So this is the one that we got in the Abandoned Old Workshop, this first one. This is the one that we got from Impostor Iosefka. And even though the first portions are sort of a different version, it's going to be identical to the one that I did the translation of before. So let me just read the final section here on this one, which is unique to this item. Once, Schoolhead Willem sought this for the sake of an eye of thought, or possibly eyes of thought, right? Because again, Japanese, singular, plural, who knows? I think it's just a little bit easier to work with the idea of a singular eye of thought, but it could be plural, right? I don't want to rule that out. But just for convenience sake, I'll say that, once Willem sought this for the sake of an eye of thought. Embracing an eye or eyes within the brain to obtain the thought of a great higher rank one, or to be grouped as a higher rank one as a person, right? So the idea seems to be that Willem wanted these third chords to elevate his thoughts, right? This is explicating the idea of he wants to elevate his thoughts. He says what we need are more eyes. He's going for these eyes of thought. And the way he's going to accomplish that is by having this relic, right? And it's tied with infant great ones. And I say this gives us no answers because what, right? Like, is this the idea that, she was forming a child and this is the third umbilical cord thing that we take from her? Maybe, right? I think the third umbilical cords, right? We know that technically they're like the string of eyes is what they're called, and they just sort of resemble umbilical cords. Maybe they serve some umbilical cord function, but they're not strictly speaking umbilical cords. They don't have to be. So maybe, but then why is it talking about Master Willem? Right? The implication from that might be that she's gotten this relic passed down from all of these, successive generations. Like, she's obviously associated with the Healing Church. And so maybe she's found a way, she's gained access to this great relic that Master Willem once thought that the Healing Church now has. And maybe this is a part of what she's using to work her transformations? Also, Gameplay Matt's brain was too fried by the third umbilical cord to recall this, but remember that she does seem to have access to the old blood as well, which she references in that line I specifically went out of my way to get in this playthrough. So I'll let Gameplay Matt complete this thought, but maybe she's found some way to combine the higher level mental functioning from the third cord with the invigorating power of the old blood. And this is the treatment that she gave to herself, and she's in the process of ascension, of either becoming a great one or raising her thoughts to the equal of the great ones, to be classed as a great one as a human herself? I don't know. But it's interesting to think about, and it gets me back again to that idea of her as the, heroine of this game, right? She's, clawing her way up to ascension, and she has utmost faith in herself that she is special, that all of her clinical trials have brought her to this moment, and that something about what's happening to her before we kill her here is going to take her to the next level. She's going to achieve the dream of ascension. And she might be successful. Especially if we think about the, writhing inside the head as the, sort of motions that are associated with some of the items that we get from the DLC. As the formation of internal eyes. She really could be forming them inside of herself right now. Or maybe she'd sort of end up as another Rom the Vacuous Spider? I don't know, incredibly unclear, because she never gets to complete her quest. Unfortunately, she's not actually the heroine of the game. Our character is the one who's sort of gonna take care of everything. We're going to bring an end to the hunt one way or the other, and we're never really gonna find out in any version of the ending of this game, playthrough, what have you, what's gonna happen to Impostor Iosefka. And so, yes, obviously, what she's doing is terrible. So I do think there is that to be said for considering this the evil storyline. But I can also sort of see the idea of her heroic nature that the director Hidetaka Miyazaki brought up in that one particular interview. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to sort of explore the storyline again, is to sort of really think that set of ideas through and put that into a playthrough. And having done that, I've gone relatively long again. I sort of suspected I wasn't going to get to the very, very end of the Upper Cathedral War just yet. It looks like maybe, if you're not familiar with the game, it looks like maybe we've done with it. No, there's more, and it's pretty exciting. But it's going to have to wait until next time, because already these ideas are flowing. If you have any thoughts, of course, about anything that I mentioned in this episode, if you think I got anything wildly wrong, if you have your own additional theories that you'd like to share, if you'd like to line up facts in one way or another as to what's going on with this storyline and what's going on with the Celestial Emissaries, anything like that, please let me know. But in the meantime, right, we're going to take a break here. I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening, and I wish all of you good hunting. Okay, come on now. I gotta be able to do some sort of gesture. All right, let's be heroic about this. Good hunting, everyone.